Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. It is a victorious Monday in Buffalo. I know Russ is sick of hearing that because he heard it already this weekend. But we're going to start with our normal pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
That's all right, Mike. It's not like I've heard that a lot in my life, so I could live with it. Let's talk about the NFL and something that should be very normal in the game. We no longer, again, for the second straight year, have any idea how to react to it. And that is neck falling is that's a norm. But the catch, we no longer know what a catch is on offense or on defense. And what I find amazing is that this is a league now where not only can you run out of challenges, but there's so many bad calls for each side in every game that they either need to start reviewing outside of the last 2 minutes of a quarter or game or give more challenges. Because, as an example, like Mike and I know, in that Buffalo game, the opposing team was out of challenges, but they did complete a 3rd and 10 that on the field they called a non-catch, but it was clearly a catch, but they couldn't review it. So then it's 4th and 21 instead of like 3rd and 10. And in the Chicago game, there was a clear interception, like a human flew through the air, caught the ball, but then, when the human hit the ground, he hit the point of the ball and it moved a little. So then they're like, no, that's not a catch. And then also in the Chicago game, a running back caught the ball, made a step, and then the guy started jostling it loose. And they're like, yeah, that's not a catch because he didn't get 2 steps. And it's like, so again, there are about 10 people in the world, and those are the guys in the striped shirts that know actually what a catch is anymore.
Yeah, that and what a fumble is, because the one that, and the Bills won, so nobody's really complaining other than the fact that if they had lost, this town would have burned to the ground after it was a catch. The guy hadn't been touched. He got up. At that point, the Bills player punched the ball out of his hands, which means it's a fumble, and they recovered it. They reviewed it for 10 minutes and then got the call wrong. If you're going to review something for 10 minutes, get the friggin' call right. How about that?
There you go.
Well, I'm done, but I'm just saying
let's get going. We got a big division to talk about here.
Yeah. Let's go.
All right, ready?
Yes.
Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, January 11th, 2021.
I'm Michael Agello, and can you actually tell that the Bills won based on how pissed off I just was?
You could. This is Russ Cohen. That's John Shannon. That's Peter
subbing in for coming out of semi-retirement.
There you go.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. We're finally at a week of a hockey season. Jeez. I mean, we have talked a lot. We've had a lot of off-season coverage in the last 9 months, but I'm really happy that we are where we are right now. And we're joined, of course, by the great and legendary John Shannon. Hello, John.
Hello, boys.
It's wonderful to have you here today.
Nice. Yeah, let me just say, John is part of a great podcast with Bob McCowan that they've been doing it the last few months, and I watch it almost every day, John, when it's on. It's really, really good stuff.
Good. Well, just to do a shameless plug.
Sure.
Please.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
And we will, and we're just not hockey, but let's face it, we're Canadian, so we're mostly hockey. Although I will tell you that we get a ton of listeners when we talk basketball right now.
Yeah,
basketball
really?
is the growing listenership when it comes to podcasts. At least that's my experience.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, interesting.
In Canada, I mean, as long as now the Raptors
John,
are 2-7, but
sure.
they're not supposed to be 2-7.
Sure.
Right.
John, I'd echo that with you about basketball. It's a very interesting point. I have a friend who does based in Winnipeg, who does a Cavaliers podcast, and the NBA
Hold on. A guy in Winnipeg does a Cavaliers podcast?
Yeah. And he's got quite the following. And the NBA is miles ahead of content development with podcasts and independents and integrating them in. And they're gangbusters. What they've done with some of the podcast networks and stuff is astounding. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I want the NHL to do more of that. I totally.
Well, no, but if the NHL does more of it, then you don't. and you don't want. What you want to do is you want to maintain your independence now.
Right.
You want what it speaks to in so many ways, and this is the discussion we always have about our podcast. Is that we'd love bigger numbers, but we're Canadian, and so there's no real notice for what we are in the United States. If McCowan was and Mike knows better than most, but McCowan was the Mike Francesa of afternoon drive radio.
I've heard him plenty of times. I've heard him plenty of times driving into Canada.
And if he had a following in the United States like Francesa did, then I tell you what, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. I'd be cashing checks, man.
That's right.
Yeah, but there's a thing about quality over quantity, John, and I'll just say Bob is quality and the other guy more quantity. But look,
here nor there, there's a recognition factor.
Yeah, there is, and but then there's a lot of us who've been listening to fan590.com since the first lockout, back down here. So there's a lot more Americans listening to you guys than you think.
Well, but again, it also speaks to the market in the United States that we deal with, because we deal with a hockey market in the United States. And when you look at the big four or the big five sports, hockey's 4 or 5.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not even sure what 5 is.
I think 4. I think 3 I'm going to say 3 or 4, but maybe I'm biased.
Well, I don't think it's ahead. It's not ahead of the NFL. It's not ahead of the NBA. It's not ahead of Major League Baseball. So it's got to be.
On podcasts, it might be ahead of Major League Baseball, John.
Well, I'm just talking about fan interest.
I think in direction. It battles baseball lately. No, it's never. I mean, of course, the numbers like right now, the major numbers.
Mind you, it also baseball skews that way because guys my age have no clue what podcasts are.
Right.
I mean, so that's the other
baseball.
part. I mean, how do I get a podcast? Do I tune it in?
John, you could use it with your transistor radio if you still have it now.
Precisely. So we're going to talk about the Great White North Division. The G.
Do not use the sponsorship, please.
No.
I call them the G. Hair Smells Terrific division because I've given new sponsors to all the divisions. But this is I'm really. And this has been I think Canadian fans, John, have been ready for this forever. They've wanted this forever, and they're going to get it now. Do you think they're going to like it as much as they thought they would? That's
I think they are.
Yeah.
I think they are for this year, and then we'll want to get back to reality. Next October.
I'm glad you said that, John, because I think as a one-off, I think they'll love it. But I can tell you that some of the teams that in the Atlantic Division that normally have the Leafs coming to town 2 or 3 times, like Buffalo, they don't want this. They want this. They want the Leafs coming into town. They want their building filled, even though it's going to be with 16, 17,000 Leaf fans. They want the Leafs in their division. So.
Yeah, and just as an aside, I American television viewers are the big losers here.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because, and I think NBC has done a really good job with hockey the last 10 years. I really do. I think that the people there have treated the product with some TLC and some quality content. They've done a great job in the playoffs. But the fact that there are no cross-border games means the NBC schedule has very little Canadiana.
Yeah,
2 games overall.
Right.
And what it will do is it will hopefully spike the NHL TV package for U.S.-based people who want to watch Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, Elias Pettersson, Johnny Gaudreau.
I know.
The Kachuk boys. We've always worried that the Canadian teams have been, not really spotlighted on American television, and NBC has done a good job the last 2 or 3 years trying to get to that. Particularly,
I'll tell you what I'm thankful for with this, though, John. This will be the first year we won't hear Canadians crying how many Canadian teams will make the playoffs, because you're guaranteed 4, and that's pretty good.
I don't think we cry that. I think we cry
on Twitter they cry.
No, they're already there. They are
the third round. I think we cry about the third round more than
I think you're right about that.
And the good news is that we're guaranteed 1 team in the third round.
Guaranteed a team in the Final Four, which is good. And honestly, you know, I've heard more Canadians saying, the 6 Canadian teams would have made the playoffs if this wasn't the case. So I've heard more of that.
Yeah, I said it, Ak.
That's what you think too, Mike.
Yes.
I'm not that. I mean, it's very.
That's not a given, though.
I don't agree with that. I think with a 56 game schedule, the variables. If you had alignment with how your divisions were normally, I think there's way more variables that would prevent more Canadian teams getting in.
I think
this is going to be a rodeo. And there's going to be the reduced season is really going to put a lot of pressure on teams to correct things quickly, maybe take risks if things aren't working out quickly, and a lot more pressure on the one thing that always keeps you out of trouble, which is goaltending.
The interesting, it's and I have used this other places, so if you've heard it already, I apologize. For the longest time, we've always said the 82 game schedule is a marathon, not a sprint. Well, you know what? This is a sprint.
Yeah.
This is a 56 game sprint, and if your goaltending goes down early, or you get I think the other issue will be when you get to the second or potentially the third game of one of these little trips that you take, the venom and the viciousness of the hockey is going to pop its way through, and we're going to see a lot more injuries. And all of a sudden you could go down quickly. I mean, a case in point. Look what Winnipeg. Look what happened to Winnipeg in the bubble. When they lost Mark Scheifele so quickly. And if you lose a big dog, notice how I got that in there with the dog.
Very nice.
When you lose a big dog like Scheifele that quickly, holy smokes, you can't afford. And I'm not even talking about losing him for COVID. If you lose him to an injury, then you're gonna find yourself in a really tough spot pretty quickly.
Yeah. Now, okay, I believe Ak is going to break it down like he's done his blogs, going 7 through 1. We don't need to do that, but
what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he'll come back and explain.
I leave for a second, and you're reprogramming the show, Mike.
No. I'm saying, are you serious? How do you do it with this? It's so difficult to handicap anything right now.
It is.
It is so difficult.
I do agree with that, but I think what we should do is maybe make an argument for who we think the playoff teams are. I thought that would be a way to start this thing, because to me that is it's easier to do. And
there's not enough Canadian teams in the playoffs, so
exactly. So who are these four? Four? And let's start with you, John. Who are your 4 playoff teams here?
Oh gosh.
I know people love making predictions.
Well, while you're gathering your thoughts on that,
you don't have to start
let me just say this, and maybe everybody can agree on this. And maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think this was a very clear-cut situation, but I think it's less now. I think everybody thought that Ottawa was guaranteed to be the non-playoff team. You could make a case for the 6 others, but Ottawa was definitely out of it. After they get Stepan, after they bring in Coburn and Paquette, Stützle is probably going to play.
Yeah.
They're not. I mean, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I think they're a lot better and they're a lot more tough of an out than they were a few weeks ago, John. And I don't think they're going to make it, but I think that they're a deeper team than a lot of people think. And with the young kids that they have, it's not, and Matt Murray in goal, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they sneak in.
Tell you what, this is going. I mean, I'm not sure you can pick 4. I really am not. I'm not trying to dodge the bullet here. I'm not sure you can pick 4 because I don't think Ottawa will make it. I do think they will be better.
Right.
I think the variable there is where's Matt Murray in all this? I mean, how good is Matt Murray now in the world of goaltending? But I think there's an argument that says Vancouver's going to be really good. I think there's an argument that says Calgary's going to be really good. I think there's one that says Edmonton's going to be good. Winnipeg's going to be better. Toronto's good, and Montreal's better. So there's 6 of the 7 teams. I mean, I think you can pick a potpourri of those 6, 4 of those 6, and not be wrong.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The hardest thing when I'm doing these predictions, excuse me, sorry. The hardest thing when I'm doing my predictions is trying to figure out who I can say legitimately I think they aren't a playoff team. Like that's the toughest thing, because these are a lot of these teams. In your head, you sit there and they say, yes, I think that's a playoff team, but the only 4 teams can make it, so they aren't a playoff team. And to me, that's the hardest thing in this kind of world.
Well, okay. I mean, Peter, go ahead, I wanted to say something.
So let's think about that for a second. You know, you make these predictions, you think who could be a good team.
Right.
We have a 56 game schedule.
Yep.
What's our American Thanksgiving date? That benchmark, right? Right. What's our date this year? Because that's going to be your telltale. You have less games to catch up on.
Easter.
If you're out, no.
Easter?
Baseball spring training. What's that, like February 27th or something?
End of February, March 1st.
I don't think you can pick a date near as much as you have to pick.
I'm just thinking
I think you have to pick that same amount of games in. Yeah. So what is that? 22?
Right. I'd say the end of February.
Yeah,
February. So you need to know where you're at that. And the interesting thing too is with these 3-game runs, these like weekend Friday, Saturday, Sunday runs that we see, like almost like Major League Baseball. Right. You know, that you think about injuries and stuff like that. The pressure on teams, if you go down 2 games in one of those 3-game series, sure, there's a different kind of pressure this year. Mm-hmm. I think the teams that manage this pressure and the different kind of grind are going to be the ones that find success. And I think the coaches who figure out how to use their goalies well are going to be the ones that find success. I think there's a guarantee. I think Toronto's going to be a lock for the playoffs. I think Edmonton and Calgary are. And I think the other ones, it's going to be a battle. They could be great, but I just don't know if they will be great.
Well, okay, and I'll dissent on this one, because I agree with the Leafs. It drives me nuts, John, that everybody's taking the Leafs to win it, finish first, because
Leaf fans hate that.
Yeah, no, because I don't think it's the case. We know how Canadian teams gin themselves up to play against the Leafs. This is not going to be a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't think they're going to finish in first, but I do think they'll be one of the top 4. The team that Peter just mentioned, that he said it was one of the 4 playoff teams that I don't think will make it, and I know, Ak, you're going to lose your mind when I say this, is the Edmonton Oilers. Because I know, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are 2 of the best forwards in the NHL, but their goaltending is borderline AHL caliber.
Well, that's not fair. Michael, that's not fair. If you look at their regular season numbers, their regular season numbers last year were not bad.
I know
they weren't 31st.
No,
right. Their regular season numbers, and I suspect that we're going to see a 28-28 breakdown between those 2 guys,
right?
Before it's over. Their regular season numbers, they were okay. They weren't as much of a disaster as they were in the playoffs. And and I think that's the measure.
Well, I agree. And here's the thing that I want to say about that.
Their biggest issue is going to be on the blue line.
Yes.
No Clefbaum for the season. He's gone. How much experience do they have? Yeah. That's where there really are going to be. That's the pressure point for the Edmonton Oilers, in my opinion, for the regular season. And that's assuming that Mike Smith and Koskinen can give them adequate goaltending. The pressure point certainly for me is on the Oilers' blue line.
Okay,
here's what I'd like to say about that for a second. The Oilers, and I'll just defend the Oilers. Last year, I picked the Oilers to finish first in the division, and everybody was laughing at me or whatever. But this year, I don't have them finishing first. But I have them finishing second. But here's the thing about that. Where I was most impressed last year with the Oilers was during that period of time towards the end of the year, when McDavid went down and wasn't playing for a while. Tippett got them playing 2-1 and winning 2-1, 3-1 games. And that fact that team showed they could do that, to me, was what showed that they're a much more mature team than they were before, and that's why I think they're ready to make it.
Right. I will go with this. I think the 2 that I feel are definitely going to make it are the Habs and the Leafs. Then Edmonton's the next team that I think is going to make it. And Vancouver and Calgary, what they have in common is one gained Markstrom, one lost Markstrom. And we don't know what losing Markstrom is going to do to Vancouver. I get that Holtby got his tortoise over the border, so he probably feels good now. But I don't know how he's going to do in net. He didn't do well in net last year. I like Demko, but what if they go with Holtby for too long and then all of a sudden it becomes an uphill battle?
That won't happen.
Okay.
That won't happen.
I mean, I can't say it's not going to happen.
I think that Pete had this point early on. I think that we're going to see coaches like baseball managers.
Yeah.
They're not going to waste any time anymore saying, I'm going to give them another game. They're going to have to make a decision. And the one thing I do think is I think there's a real belief in Vancouver that Demko is not a 2. He's a 1A.
No, I believe that too. But again, how long would they stick with Holtby? Here's the thing. I know we say that the coach can make this decision and he's going to be like a baseball manager. The coach is checking with the goalie coach first. Then they're checking with the sports science guy, and then they're going to make a decision.
Hey, listen. In the end, Travis Green is going to make the decision, and Travis Green is going to use the seat of his pants because that's what's made Travis Green a solid NHL coach.
Yeah.
Every coach by now has gone through the schedule. They've talked to their goalie coach. They've talked about workload. They've talked about variables. They've talked about how they want to, if you've got a 3-game series coming up and your number one is getting lit up on game 1, how do you prevent a Patrick Waugh situation where everyone gets angry knowing you got to play the same team 2 more games and it's not a playoff series? There's variables here that we haven't seen before. And I think we have to really consider that the amount of communication going on between the coaching staff, particularly for goalies, and with goalies is going to be massive. There's egos involved. There's contracts and bonuses involved. Yeah. There's all sorts of things here. This is a very different situation. And, there's going to be some mess ups. There's going to be some successes, and there's going to be some very cool things that are discovered in this process. Whether we hear about it is another thing, but someone's going to learn something very interesting.
See, we can talk a lot about, I think that goaltending across the board, I think the Canadian teams have done a good job and I know Edmonton tried. They just couldn't get anything done.
Right.
Of improving goaltending. To me, this is all about depth. This is all about not a 20-man roster, not a 23-man roster. This is a 29-man roster.
Yep.
And how you're able to use your depth because you're going to go to the depth a lot quicker, I think. And so, like for instance, in Winnipeg, I love the Nate Thompson and Trevor Lewis signings. Veteran guys, been through the wars. They need some leadership there. They won't play a lot of minutes, but they're going to play, 10 to 14 minutes and you know what, be effective. And it's going to be, to me, and I think every team has tried to improve their depth. If you look at every team, Montreal, the only place they haven't improved their depth, in my opinion, is at the center. But Montreal's depth on the wings is much better than it used to be.
Yeah.
You talked about Ottawa. Ottawa's depth is much better. That to me is going to be the key big measure. And I think not just in the Canadian division, but in the other 3 as well, is how many times are we dealing with players 25, 26, 27 and knowing that they're going to have to contribute 33, 34 games in this season already, and I think that's going to be a big key to the success of any team.
Well, I think what I really want to see here as this plays along is I really want to see how teams affect teams who are streaky work out in this situation, because there's certain teams who are streaky. The Flyers being one of them in Philly. We were talking about Nashville being streaky. When goal scoring go cold and you have a bunch of games in a row, that's where you can't let yourself fall behind too far. And that's why I'm really kind of surprised that everybody is so high on Montreal. Like I'm, you guys know,
it's a good mix, Zach. That's why
I'm usually pretty high on Montreal, but they don't make the playoffs last year were it not for the bubble.
No,
right?
But they're a different team now.
I know, but we learned a lot about it's interesting because we talked about, Montreal shouldn't make the playoffs. They'd be better off with Lafreniere. They're better off, and they made the playoffs. Now, then they had to do well in the playoffs, and now suddenly everyone's like Montreal's a better team now. And now granted, they made some good moves. I'm not denying that, but are they really like a guaranteed playoff team?
Well, if Suzuki and Kotkaniemi grow from what they did in the playoffs, because then you have Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, and Danault up the middle, and that's why they didn't make any additions up the middle, because they're riding that. They added Toffoli, they added Josh Anderson.
Yeah,
they bring in Edmondson, so I think their defense is.
Yeah, they added everything. They added defensive depth. They added goal scoring,
backup goaltender,
and the backup goalie. Like that was losing them points.
So think of it this way too, though. When you talk about all these different things, 2 points here. One, interesting. You bring up the depth and running down the middle with Montreal. Is there a better season to let your youth run than this season?
No,
it's an interesting approach, right? The other thing I think is going to be, we talk about other variables that could affect things. What about coaching? Who are the coaches who dig their heels in and force their systems and tactics to the end all be all, no matter what the situation? When you're in a 3-game series now, and that team is shutting you down, and your goal scorers aren't scoring goals,
right?
They're stifling you. Who's able to adjust their tactics quickly and make changes? You don't have the recovery time anymore. It's going to take a while we're going to really see some coaching. We're going to see some interesting things about the coaches.
Pete, I think that's a really good point. I think there are two. I think there are two guys that it will have a bigger effect with than others, and that's DJ Smith in Ottawa, who now has a full season under his belt and understands what it's like to be an NHL coach. And I think Dave Tippett understands his team much better now too in Edmonton.
Yeah.
And I think that I think Dave was shocked at that 4 games against the Blackhawks in the bubble. I think he was shocked. So I think he's walked away and learned a lot, and knows how to. I think with the addition of Kyle Turris as that third center, which is going to be, I think, important for them.
Well,
I think that knowledge of which buttons to push at the right time will be a difference maker for a lot of coaches. And I if you want to put Sheldon in there too here in Toronto, I mean, that's fair. Although I'm still a little flummoxed about the Maple Leafs. They keep searching for leadership.
Yeah.
They changed the coach because they didn't like the leadership of Mike Babcock. John Tavares came; he was supposed to be a leader. Jason Spezza came, and he was supposed to be a leader. Now we're on rendition number 4, and Joe Thornton's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because there's so much talent and so much ego with their young stars. And how do you manage Marner, Matthews, and all these? I mean, hey, throw in Patrick Marleau to come in there as well as one of those guys that was supposed to do this.
Right, that's fair.
And every once in a while, it doesn't work.
That's a fantastic point. That's a fantastic point, John. Honestly, and I'll let you go after this, Mike. I'm sorry, but it's a fantastic point, because the idea here is, at what point do you actually just put the pressure on Marner and Matthews and say, come on, I
think they did that when they signed those contracts.
Yes,
that's me.
They did, but they still, like you said, by bringing in other people to help them along and to lead them and guide them and all that stuff. It's at some point it feels that the Toronto thing of like, okay, there's going to be pain for a while type concept, that I just can't stand about the Maple Leafs and the way they treat things sometimes. Is very afraid of putting people.
And have they resolved enough on their blue line, Mike? You know this better.
No, and that was
enough there.
That was the point I was going to bring up, John, because I think they're searching around for leadership. They bring in Marleau, they bring in Spezza, they bring in Thornton, and
I just
Simmons.
said that, Mike. You're repeating.
Right. No, I know, but
what are you doing? This isn't talk radio where you have to fill. We got to get the quality content right away. Come on.
But the problem is that over the last 4 years, they have not addressed the blue line. And of course, the situation, and they bring in TJ Brody, and I think he's a fine defenseman. He's a top 4 guy. But if they don't have some sort of success in the postseason right now, when in the hell are you going to trade William Nylander, because he's the guy who's most movable, and get yourself a top pairing defenseman? Because that's the only thing that's missing, is a top pairing defenseman.
And leadership.
Okay. First of all, yeah, sure. Boy, Pete, way to go. I like Brody.
Yeah.
I did a lot of Calgary games the last 8-9 years, and Brody was up and down. I'm not sure, and Leaf fans may just roll over and try to punch me at my Starbucks when I say this. I'm not sure there's much difference between Brody and Tyson Barrie. I'll be honest. I'm not sure there's much difference.
I'd agree with that, John.
You know, and
I think
and
it's better defense.
And I'll tell you what, TJ has struggled. The Flames didn't re-sign him for a reason, for the dollars. You know, and TJ had 3 years ago had an unbelievable season. Has not been the same since.
Right.
You know, I think it's a blessing for Brody that there isn't people in the seats this year, because how he reacts to pressure in Toronto as an Ontario kid is one of those measures of a key situation, I think, for the hockey club. You know.
Interesting.
You know, the thing about the Leafs is when you go through such a seismic shift, which the Leafs tend to do, and you always bring in something to try and stabilize it because you're unsure of the shift, does that undermine the psyche what's in the room? Should Nylander, Marner, and Matthews and Riley not be the leadership, and you don't need the one entity, but you need them to lead as a team?
So you know what you know what's interesting about that? Look at the Minnesota Wild. Okay, like we saw what the Minnesota Wild have done, right? Is that the next? Are we looking at the future of the Maple Leafs there in the Minnesota Wild, saying, okay, we got to get rid of Stahl, we're going to get rid of Koivu because we need the young guys to take over?
Well, I mean, if they don't do it this year, they could be getting rid of Dubas, and Anderson will be gone too. I think those would be the changes.
Yeah. Again, I don't
see any of. I'll be honest, Russ. I don't see any of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see them jumping from Dubas.
I don't see any of that. I think that there is such confidence in Kyle Dubas. Yeah. I think there's a real, and I think
even if they go out in the first round again, there's still that confidence. Really?
Yeah. I do. I think that there's a real belief that Kyle. By the way, he's been in the organization 7 years.
Yeah. No, I get it.
And I really believe that the ownership likes his approach, likes his philosophical style to not only the play but how to manage the media. I think he's in a really good spot still here in Toronto.
What about Freddie Anderson in the playoffs? He goes out first round again. You're going to give him a new contract? I wouldn't.
No, but that's a different story.
No, but I put them both together.
Okay. Give me the new goalie that's going to replace Anderson for those dollars.
I have to go see who the market is next year. I don't know.
And that becomes right. I mean, listen, Anderson has underperformed in the postseason. Hey,
the key for the Leafs is not to think Anderson's their only solution and then overpay him as the only solution. That's the key.
Yeah.
Right. And it's hard to do. So it's hard to do.
I think Kyle's smarter than that. I don't see that.
Help me with this one. Kyle Dubas, I know is very popular in Toronto and all that, but
not necessarily. But
no.
Okay, but not okay. I'll say this: not popular among the rest of the NHL GMs. Like he's a guy who, when you talk to other GMs, they feel he's arrogant. They feel he's like, oh, Toronto is everything. Toronto is the greatest thing in the world. And it's interesting. Now, I don't know that affects him in one way or the other. And you don't have to be their best friend when you're GM. But I think at times people don't trust him when making moves. I talked to one GM. He was trying to make a move with this summer. He's like, I just can't trust the guy. I don't know. I think.
But you shouldn't trust any other GM.
Yeah, no, but they do have But they have relationships. There are.
I don't think Kyle Dubas could go out and be personal and try to break into the old hockey boys club and sort of be that guy.
He's not an old hockey guy.
But he isn't. And the thing is you can't tell me there's not 31 other GMs in the league who wouldn't love to be operating with Toronto's budget.
Sure. There were two GMs this summer.
And that's why I wouldn't trust. I don't care if the Pope was the GM of the Leafs.
I'm not talking about old hockey guys. I'm not talking about old hockey guys. There were two GMs this summer, McCrimmon and Dubas, who were getting ripped by every GM you talked to for the way they were. What
do they both have in common, Act? They both have unlimited friggin' budgets. I mean,
this isn't about budgets. I'm talking about trades. Like when they were talking about trades, they would call someone up and say, "I'll make this trade." The best example was some of the trades that the Vegas was trying to make to move to bring in Pietrangelo.
Yeah.
Some of those trades that they would call a team and say, "I'll give you this guy for a second round pick," and that guy that didn't seem okay. And they come back later and say, "You know what? I can't do that. I'm doing something else instead." And there was stuff like that was going on. And This is the kind of stuff that I don't. Am I wrong in this, John? At all? Did you hear any of this that I'm talking about?
I've heard both guys. They're not in that network at times, but at the same time, I mean, they have jobs to do.
Yeah.
No question.
They have jobs to do. I there's a combination of old boys club a little bit, even some of those young guys you talked to, Eck, and you know what? Grass is greener in Vegas. Grass is greener in Toronto.
True.
And boy, I think Mike's right about, I'm not sure that it's an unlimited budget, but they certainly have more flexibility.
Yeah.
And by the way, both guys have put themselves in a really tough spot.
Sure.
Yeah.
With the cap. I mean, when you think about all the contracts that they signed, and things have not been the same for Kyle since he signed John Tavares.
Right.
Because of where the money is, and in a similar situation, things have not really augured very well for Kelly since he took over.
Yeah.
Simply because he upset the apple cart in Vegas.
Right.
Yeah. But you think about McCrimmon and Dubas, and I think Dubas is a little different in terms of personality and approach than Kelly McCrimmon is. But I go back to the Moneyball scene where Brad Pitt's trying to make trades, right? And he's like, Suzanne, get me Shapiro on 3. And he's thinking he's going to wheel and deal and do all this stuff. And I think that's the impression that you get. These guys who are thinking a little bit differently, trying to try new things, because that's what they've been tasked with and that's what they believe in. And it's hard because I think hockey's even more entrenched in traditionalist thinking and relationships than any of the other 4 major team sports.
Well,
they're sort of
the measure though, Pete. The measure though is, and I think this is the biggest problem that hockey has, or maybe it isn't a problem. The biggest issue that in hockey is that you design a team for 56 games this year, and it's not the same team that you designed for 24 games to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Right.
And so like I'd love to have Kyle Dubas's issues and problems with his roster for a regular season.
Yeah.
But do they play tough enough? Do they play focused enough?
Right.
Are they disciplined enough to win the Stanley Cup?
It's a great point.
And I think I know the answer to that.
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find that focus and discipline. And push the right button to get a Joe Thornton in here, by the way, who hasn't won the Stanley Cup in his career.
That's a great point.
To make this team better after the 8th of May. That's the key.
Yeah.
After the 8th of May. I mean, everything Kelly did for Vegas was really good.
Well, I mean,
where did they go?
Yeah.
Well,
They didn't win.
Right.
This is the issue that's a common theme with not only McCrimmon, not only Dubas, but Julian Brisebois in Tampa Bay. They all planned out their situations with their respective teams based on what the cap was going to be without the atom bomb of COVID. They were expecting the cap to grow. So the $11 million contract of Matthews and Tavares and almost 11 of Marner and 7, they expected to grow the cap enough over the next 2 or 3 years that they'd be able to afford another defenseman or afford a goaltender. And now they're scrambling because that money's not going to be there.
But
that's life.
That's 31 teams have the same issue. And by the way, I'm still affected by COVID too. So tough.
Right.
So bear down, boys. Bear down.
Right.
So to break up the Leafs talk for a minute, I know
Thank you.
It's hard to do. John, there's a strategy going on with teams, and I saw it today a little with the Flyers. They sent down 7 guys, but 2 of the 7 they didn't send down were Tyson Forster and Zayd Wisdom. And so of the 6 taxi squad guys, and I don't know if they'll make it on taxi squad or not, but I think teams are going to hold 1 or 2 of their top prospects, play them once every week till they hit their 6 games, and then send them off to the OHL. And I think that's going to take up a couple of spots early on for a lot of teams.
That's if the OHL comes back.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is, Russ, is that you have to remember you do have this taxi squad, but it's not as simple as that. You still have to, those guys on the taxi squads, if they're veteran players, still have to go through waivers.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're smarter to keep, entry level guys. You're smarter to keep prospects.
Right.
So you can bring them up by 2:00.
Right.
Which is,
I think there has to be some economy of that within that six player list.
right.
To make it a lot easier for coaches and managers to make those last minute decisions.
Which is one of the reasons why the Leafs kept Russ's favorite goalie, Aaron Dell, on their roster, because they're afraid that New Jersey is going to claim him on waivers because they need a goaltender.
Well, that's a real fear. It is.
They probably would have. I mean, I think that's pretty safe to say.
No.
But I think so. So let's look at. So we have. Okay, so Calgary, Montreal. You obviously we all kind of agree. Maybe Calgary. Can we all say that we?
I
Think
didn't
Toronto,
even agree on Calgary.
can we all say Toronto is a playoff team? Can we
I
all
said
say
Toronto and Montreal are my guarantees.
Anybody say Toronto is not a playoff team? Okay, so we're good. We got one of our playoff
I feel like John wants to say it but can't.
No. I was going to bite my lip on the Montreal thing. I think Montreal's on the cut. I think that I don't think Ottawa's making it. I'm going to do it backwards. I don't think Ottawa's making it, and I think that there's 3 or 4 teams on the cusp.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that so if you put the Maple Leafs on the one side that should,
Right.
and you got Ottawa on the other side, then you got 5 teams on the. I think you have 5 teams on the cusp. And if you told me that Winnipeg's going to make it, Calgary's making it, and Vancouver's making it, I wouldn't argue. And if you said Edmonton, Vancouver, and Montreal, I wouldn't argue. That's where the mass of the Canadian division is those 5 teams.
Right.
Yeah.
Really, really are going to fight for 3 spots.
I would have put Vancouver in the have not category until they brought in Hamonic on a PTO. That solidifies their defense, along with Schmidt, along with Edler, along with Quinn Hughes, and with the offense that they have. I think now they're in that middle mix. But I didn't like their defense, John, before they decided to make that move. Now I think it's better.
It's funny, you guys touched on it earlier about how Montreal, learned something in the bubble, and they're a better team in the bubble, and they deserve more respect. I think Vancouver had learned more than any other team.
Yeah, you might be right.
Played better than and Demko Demko became part of that.
Yeah,
no question.
The way he played in the playoffs. Bo Horvat was a different player in the bubble. I think the Vancouver Canucks. I might even go on to say, if you're going to ask me for 2 locks, my locks might be the Maple Leafs and the Canucks.
Maple Leafs and the Canucks. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
So Pete, nobody has mentioned Winnipeg, Pete. Not even.
Yeah. Well, and for good reason. I think Winnipeg is the reason why you question Winnipeg is you have as good a top 6 as you're going to find in any team in the NHL, and then after that it gets really ugly and confusing until you get to the net.
Which is why Thompson and Lewis have a real chance to be difference makers, in my opinion.
Yeah, they do.
John, the talk in Winnipeg right now always centers around Patrick Laine, and you can get T-shirts. You can get T-shirts now that say "I'm here, aren't I?" From a response to the. We've gone. I was going
to wear one today on this podcast.
Yeah, right. And you can get those T-shirts as well, and everyone's still talking about Laine and what this means and how this fits going forward. Matthew Perreault is placed on waivers today. That's $4 million freed up, and not really, but in theory it is. In theory it is, and people are saying, speculating that these are the hard decisions that are going to have to be made to keep Laine. Do you think Laine is keepable for the Jets? And do you think this is the guy who either he adapts to what's coming and shows that Cheval Day off that he has to spend the money to keep him? Or do you think this is Patrick Laine's last season? I'm curious what your take is, because there's a lot of spitballing going around and no one seems to have a decent pulse.
Yeah, first of all, I think Kevin has a really good idea. Kevin's just saying keeping everything close to the vest.
Yeah, very.
And I think a lot of it has to do with what Patrick's relationship is with Scheifele and Wheeler and all those guys in that top 6. The Laine issue isn't going to go away until it's resolved one way or the other. This is going to be something that's going to be a fact. It's actually a blessing that there aren't reporters in rooms.
Right.
It's actually a blessing that there aren't people in seats for Laine, because it won't be near the pressure this year than it would have been if we were a full season.
True.
That's a good point.
The asset that is Laine, I mean, if he can have his head screwed on properly, if Paul Maurice can find a way to get his top 6 forwards to work together, then he's absolutely part of the future of the Winnipeg Jets. But that becomes the big question for me: is it how do they do that? Have they tried enough already to do it?
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody knows the answer other than Kevin and maybe Mark Chipman. And I think they know, and they're not prepared to say it at this point. I think they're trying to whittle their way through it. By the way, I mean, like, waivers today, perhaps waivers tomorrow. I mean, we're going to see a ton of guys.
Yeah.
A lot of names.
This is all pure.
A lot of names.
This is all pure.
It's all
What's your
cap
number on opening night versus what's your number on? I mean, guys going on LTIR later in the week. I mean, this is the capologist Christmas right now. Because there are so many things that, I mean, I don't understand them all, but I keep getting told by managers saying, listen, we have to do it this way. We have to do it this day. A lot of managers put a lot of stars on waivers today, hoping they get hidden in the forest.
Right.
You know, there's how many guys, and, you know, are we going to get this guy through? Because there's some pretty quality hockey players on waivers today.
Yeah.
To take them.
We should talk about that. Is there anybody on waivers today that could get grabbed?
Corey Perry?
I was going to say Perry for $700K.
For $700K, John, I mean,
you can have.
But there's a reason he also took a deal for $700K.
That's right.
Yeah. Right? Like, you got to flip it both ways. I mean, no one's going to take Matthew Perreault.
It does do the simple fact is, for the next 30 days, he becomes movable off the taxi squad and onto the roster for 30 days easier.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, and is Corey Perry, you know, with the way we've discussed the schedule and the 3 and 5 days and all this, is he going to be an everyday player?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think he will be.
Yeah, he won't be.
I mean, but Esa Tikkanen wasn't an everyday player either, but you're not paying him a lot, but you might need him in the room and you might want him for the playoffs. He still did something in the playoffs.
I'll give you.
That's the risk, but that's my point, Russ. This is the risk day today.
Yeah.
This is the day that managers saying, I'm going to put 4 guys on and pray that nobody takes them. This is 2 years ago when Dubas put 2 goaltenders on and lost both of them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean,
I remember.
And he's learned his lesson because he didn't do that. But I'll give you a few names here who are former first round, former high draft picks who might earn, like Noah Juleson got claimed by Florida today. Former first round pick of the Canadians. He's I think he's on his entry level deal. Yeah. He's like 22 years old. It's a risk worth taking. A guy like Philip Schlappick from the Senators might be somebody that somebody would take a look at. Jujhar Khaira from Edmonton. These are cheap contracts. These are not like really expensive contracts. Nobody's going to claim Tyler Johnson. It's $5 million for 4 more years. No one.
Right, and they've tried obviously to move him plenty of times too. Yeah,
but even with the thing like Juleson, he was rushed. So now, if you take him, you are starting from scratch to try and get something out of him, and some teams don't even want to do that anymore.
Well, I mean, and Juleson's an interesting one because he came out of junior hockey. Yeah, there were. He's a different cat. Russ, you probably talked to him. I remember talking to him at prospects camp, and. No, he was different. He was always different, and I wondered if he would ever fit into the NHL. And then he had the eye issue, if you remember.
I think it was an eye. I think you're right.
Yeah, you wonder how that's affected him, and there are times, and I looked at waivers the last couple of days, and there are times when you see. Former prospects saying, have teams finally given up on them? Are they giving up on them quickly?
Right.
And because of COVID and because of cap management, do they have to give up on them quicker?
I think that's a good point. I think on some of them they do. There's a couple that they don't. Like, as an example, the Flyers have Derek Pouliot in there because Derek Pouliot finally realized after 4 or 5 times, hey, I'm not an offensive defenseman anymore, but I can move the puck. So maybe I can get some time that way. If players figure it out, John, they can find a role for themselves.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Russ. To me, Derek is come from the Michael Del Zotto school of hockey. How many teams can you play for? and
John Sillinger still has.
God bless these guys. Yeah. I mean, to make that kind of money.
Mike Sillinger, rather. Mike Sillinger has the record, I think.
Good for them.
Yeah. All right, let's touch on one other thing with this before we get out of here today. So we have talked about, and I think this is valid. We've talked about how these teams are going to do in the regular season, we're sort of all on the same page. Some of us have different guarantees. Some of I think Edmonton's a guarantee. Mike thinks Edmonton's not. John says Vancouver's a guarantee. Perhaps Peter says you say the Montreal. No, Russ said Montreal's a guarantee. Peter said
Montreal. Yeah.
Anyway,
I said Montreal and Toronto are a guarantee for me.
Regular season is one thing. Now let's get to the playoffs. We all think Toronto could win this division, but do we think Toronto is going to be the team out of this division in the playoffs?
I think
in the playoffs, they'll make the playoffs. I just don't
make
know
the playoffs. Who is built for the playoffs?
Montreal.
Who's built for the playoffs?
I think Montreal is almost built.
I think Calgary is too.
Calgary too. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
question about who gets to the playoffs. This isn't just. This is who gets to the playoffs with the least amount of damage done to them.
Right. I think Vancouver is set up for that, Eck, but
so do I.
But yeah, I think they're set up for that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, let's just say this: the additions that Montreal made. Mark Bergevin made the smartest moves that he could make for the coach that he has, because Claude Julien, Josh Anderson is a Claude Julien type of player. Yeah. Edmondson is a Claude Julien type of player. Now he has a 1-2 combo in goal that, I'm not to say that you're not going to play Carey Price as much as you can, but now you have Jake Allen as your backup, so it's not going to kill you to have.
This is the most positive Mike has ever been about Montreal in like 5 years.
I like the moves that they made. I think they're
about that.
I mean, Josh Anderson's a really good player if he can stay healthy.
Right.
If he can stay healthy.
But he hasn't.
Yes.
Right.
Eck and I joked about this. I think when they signed him.
Yeah.
He's a poor man's Tom Wilson.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
I mean, he can play the game. He can score goals, and then he's a physical force. And boy, oh boy, he's fun to watch when he's that way. But you know what? We haven't seen very much of it because he hasn't been able to stay healthy.
But every team in this
100%.
Every team in this division has what could be a fatal flaw. I mean, with Montreal, I still wonder whether they can score enough.
Right.
Even though they added the players that they did. With Calgary, I don't know how good their defense is after losing Hamonic, after losing Brody. Winnipeg, the same thing. Vancouver, Edmonton, obviously, is the defense and the goaltending. I mean, they all have an issue.
Yeah, I see that with the Leafs too. It's defense and goaltending. I think it's even more defense. I mean, I'll even give Anderson a little bit of a pass, but I am growing tired of him in the postseason. But if
the Leafs is just winning around. I mean, they've got to win around. The Leafs have to.
They have to. I mean, it's just with the amount of talent they have. But again, this is where Kyle Dubas really does need to bring in a useful defenseman at the deadline that could really help them. And I know it's hard, but he's going to have to do it. He's collecting old talent right now. On the same way we are on this show.
Go ahead, so hold on. I heard that. So you say they have to win around. And let's go all the way to May and say it's Toronto, Montreal in the first round.
Right.
And it's Calgary, Edmonton in the first round.
Yeah. Right.
Is there an upset? And the answer is there isn't an upset.
No, there's not an upset.
There wouldn't be an upset. So this is going to be a year that is not going. You cannot measure anything long term on this year. I don't think.
Right.
I really don't think. I think this is, if you win, great. If you lose, it's a 56 game during the pandemic.
And you know what really interesting thing
and you wait for October.
A really interesting thing about that, I talked to 3 different people at 3 different teams, and these are smaller teams. These aren't like the teams. These aren't Canadian teams. These are American teams and this Southern American teams. Ones out west. They're just like these are teams that are definitely hurting for money and are going to have a tough time without having fans there. Where these are teams you wonder if they could stay around. And these teams, are all basically saying the same thing, that we want to make the playoffs, but if we make the playoffs, we're going to lose more money.
Yeah,
I've heard that being thrown out, and it's kind of crazy. Like we want, so what is that? What are the owners? Some of the owners say
still the pride factor act like when
but some of these owners are. It's not about pride. These owners are really up against it.
No, I know, but like even in the other leagues, like the Dodgers won the World Series, they're still thrilled they won the World Series. Do they get the benefits? Like, do the Lightning get the benefits of a Stanley Cup team with extra fans being able to raise ticket prices? No, but they sell a little bit more merch. I get it, but they still
they all want to win the Stanley Cup. But it's not winning.
But you bring up a really good point, Dick. And by the way, I don't think it's just small market teams that are feeling this.
Yeah.
Every team is feeling this.
Yeah.
Every team is feeling. What do you mean? We're going to lose $25 million.
Right.
We're going to lose $30 million.
Right.
No matter what. And you can skin this cat any way you want with logos on helmets, with logos on the glass, which we're going to see, with logos on standings. That's just to mitigate the issues that exist. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
But they are going to get
they're waiting for the last expansion payment from Seattle.
Well, that's the point. They're going to get that.
Yeah. But that's
that a
lot of that's been spent already.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they've spent next year's TV revenue.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. No. This is a survival league. This is a survival season. This is just we got to get through this season. And I'm not saying every one of those teams would take winning a Stanley Cup. That's not what I'm saying. But it's but making the playoffs, winning, going out in the first round, going out in the second round. That's a losing thing for a lot of teams. That's really just a different.
No players' salaries in the playoffs. That's the only positive about this. So.
Yeah, but somebody told me how much they lose just per game, just for opening up the arena. It's a lot of money.
Well, we don't know. I'm going to be the optimist here, I guess. We don't know that they can't have fans in the playoffs yet. We don't know.
No, right. Listen.
They will in some markets, John. Like if the Florida Panthers made the playoffs, they would have fans because they're going to have fans now.
Yeah, but
Tampa.
I'll tell you what. For instance, just as an aside, I went on. I can go on a website here and calculate when I'm going to get my vaccination.
Right.
August,
right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
August.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll be playing in August.
Yeah.
That's why most of the teams they've made announcements that there's not going to be fans for the entire regular season. They didn't say the playoffs, but they said
nobody's really
regular season for sure.
Listen, by May, hopefully by May, middle of May, life's better, life's good, life's improving, but we're we haven't even hit the pinnacle after Christmas.
Right.
No, but John, just as an example, and I'm not saying it's right, it's definitely wrong. I mean, the Titans had 16,000 people in the crowd. That's
Outdoors.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's a lot of people. If you looked at the lower areas, they were highly concentrated.
Well, again,
and the Predators.
The country I live in is really upset that we have 2,000 cases a day.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
We've
been much more meticulous with it than your country has been.
No question.
3,000 deaths today. So it's totally. I mean,
one day.
To me, you say that about the Titans, and the Predators are having quarantine issues already, right? The Predators already had to had some issues. So I mean, there's some states down south that are just not.
The Kings, it's bad in LA.
Well, Tampa Bay was going to have fans in the stands, and then they decided not to for the entire season.
And I think that's going to happen in other places too. Like I think I can see Florida having to back up.
I have a question about that. So the Lightning have decided not to. Have the Raptors decided not to also? Okay, because I know they were selling tickets for a little while. Okay,
it's all right. They're 2-7. Nobody's showing up anymore.
It's done. 2-7.
I just got to show you this. My dog Kevin is trying to get through the cat door. So I'm going. Kevin.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
He's after a minion. So
man, you can go take care of him. We're good. No, we're out of time anyway. So, but thanks, John, so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Take care of your dogs. I know I'm going to have to find mine somewhere. I think if he hasn't run away already.
I got one in the yard, one in another room. Cats somewhere, a couple cats, a rabbit. I got all kinds of.
Tomorrow we'll talk about the fact that I have the Penguins and the Capitals not in the playoffs, and everyone's yelling at me about that.
Stop. What?
I used to have a lizard, Russ.
Oh yeah.
I had a beautiful Australian bearded dragon.
Oh, they're great.
And I went to work one day. When I came back, my wife had given it away to the painter.
Oh.
I could not believe it.
She liked that much, huh?
Lizard away.
I have a friend who moved, and they built a lizard room in their house.
Well, I had a lizard room. I had a special. It was a room that was. It had a glass
control
and
bearded dragons are awesome. We had one. It was called the Lizard of Oz, and so we named it the Lizard of Oz.
We had Howard.
It's really good stuff.
Howard the Lizard.
Ours was the Lizard of Oz. That was a great name.
All
Cheers,
right.
boys.
John.
Take care, Johnny.
Thanks, John.
All right, so tomorrow we're going to be talking about the Eastern Division, and
we will have Dan Petru join us.
Dan Petru will be joining us. Good old Dan Petru.
I'm good till about 1:45. Then I have to run tomorrow.
Good. Yeah, tomorrow I guess we're and then so I'm going to get you'll have a lot of fun picking on me tomorrow because everyone thinks my picks for this division are absolutely insane. So enjoy that.
We have fun every day. It's a gift.
Yeah, but this division I think is really being. It's funny when I look through this division trying to look at who everybody was predicting. Like where people were predicting it. There's an unbelievable amount of people who have Boston number 1 and Philly number 2 in this division.
Oh my god!
No,
I'm telling you. I'll show you the first 5.
I believe it.
I believe you, but
The first 5 sites I went to today had that.
There are going to be 3 or 4 fan bases in the East that are going to be very upset when their teams don't make the playoffs.
I know. That's why I said my predictions are crazy, and we'll talk about that. Yep. All right. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching. A couple of you guys joined up on Patreon over the past week. We really appreciate that. Go to patreon.com/hockey if you can and support the show. If you get anything out of this at all, $5 a month really makes a huge difference in our lives. Remember, without the buzz, it is just